Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. I'm back once again with my co-host for this evening, author and UCLA professor Chon Noriega, an expert on the subject of Latino images in film, which is our theme this month on TCM. He's also a man we've kept very busy because he helped us program our films in this series. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Robert. It's great to be here.
Thanks, John. Now, this evening we've been showing movies about social issues involving Latinos. Well, our next movie on that subject is a really powerful drama about three Italian boys accused of killing a blind Puerto Rican. It's from United Artists in 1961, and it stars Burt Lancaster, Shelley Winters, and Dina Merrill. It's called The Young Savages. Now, this is a terrific movie. Same year, West Side Story came out. But why, I don't have to ask you why you picked this, but your thoughts about the film.
Well, it's interesting. In some ways, it almost gets drowned out by West Side Story, which is in color, it's a musical, and this is a black and white police procedural, essentially. But I think what's fascinating about the film is, one, it's trying to take on just a stunning array of issues, from juvenile delinquency to the death penalty for minors, racism, ethnic pride, prostitution, drugs, and gangs. And it sets up an interesting contrast between Puerto Rican and Italian American, between kind of white ethnic and a racial minority group. But the procedural allows the character played by Burt Lancaster, Assistant DA Hank Bell, to basically go back and forth between these two communities and try to figure out what the story is, and ultimately reveal that what's happened is much more complicated. So that, combined with John Frankenheimer's cinematography, his approach to the film, give a very different look to exploring issues related to the Puerto Rican community or to a multi-ethnic, multiracial New York. Some of the more powerful scenes in the film involve depictions of the Puerto Rican community, for example, the funeral for the 15-year-old boy who's murdered by the Italian gang members. And in some ways, it becomes a haunting presence within the film that it can't quite resolve, given the genre that they're working within.
It's a great movie, so I'm glad that you picked this for everybody to see. Here it is from 1961, also with Telly Savalas in the cast, and directed by John Frankenheimer. Here's The Young Savages. Very strong film. And back with me right now is the man who chose it to be part of our look at Latino images in film, my co-host, the author and UCLA professor, Chon Noriega. Now, that's such an interesting movie. Let's talk a little about the Italian-American influences in this movie, besides the Mexican-American influences. Well, going right with Evan Hunter, who wrote it.
Well, it's interesting because the Hank Bell character is revealed as Hank Bellini. He's Italian-American, and in some ways, that acknowledgement, and he speaks Italian, shifts the sympathy towards the Italian-American characters and resolves some issues for them at an individual level. You don't get anything like that on the Puerto Rican side.
Right.
But in some ways, you could almost see that character as an autobiographical character for Evan Hunter, who wrote the novel and the screenplay, had also written Blackboard Jungle, and would later do Walk Proud.
And the screenplay of The Birds for Hitchcock.
As well as The Birds. He did the high and the low end. Well, his name was Salvatore Lombino, and he was an Italian-American writer who couldn't get his work published and changed his name in order to be able to get past the prejudice of the publishing houses. So there's a way in which this film is kind of working at an autobiographical level as well. That said, what happens is you get a very unsatisfying resolution of the story from the Puerto Rican point of view. You have the presence of the mother as somebody who has lost her son, who has had these terrible revelations about her daughter as well. And when she asks for justice, all the Burt Lancaster character can say is, well, a lot of people killed your son. And that's it. And it's not quite the truth. Even the character who is let off at the end, who's a would-be son-like figure to the Hank Bell character, technically, yes, he didn't stab the boy, but he certainly went there with the intention of taking part in a murder. So there's a lot of inconsistencies at that level in terms of really addressing equally the significance of the of the incident. It's the focus of the drama for both sides of the story.
Interesting. Well, we're going to move on. Chon and I are done for this evening, but we're going to be back again on Thursday to talk about more films in our Latino Images Festival. In the meantime, though, do stick with us, because up next we have Glenn Ford as a teacher in an inner-city school. It's a film also based on a book by Evan Hunter, with a cast that includes Anne Francis and Sidney Poitier, and was directed by Richard Brooks. Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. All month long, we've been examining how Latinos have been portrayed in films over the years. The festival is part of our ongoing series we call Race and Hollywood. And with me to help introduce these films, as he has been all month, is author and UCLA professor Chon Noriega. Chon is also the author of this really interesting book called Shot in America, Television, the State, and the Rise of Chicano Cinema. Welcome, Chon.
Thank you, Robert. It's great to be here.
Good to have you here. Well, our next film is called Greenwich Village. It's from 20th Century Fox, 1944, and it's also a TCM premiere. It also stars somebody I've been wanting to, from day one, to be able to introduce in a Fox musical on TCM, and that's the dazzling Carmen Miranda. Now, interestingly, Carmen Miranda is thought to be Brazilian. She's actually from Portugal, right?
Yeah.
And does a lot of Portuguese singing sometimes. But she was, talk about her a little, she was like incredible. She was a force unto herself.
She was. She was called the Brazilian bombshell. She was born in Portugal, but essentially raised in Brazil. And by the 1930s became the most popular performer in South America.
Right.
And would then come to the United States, where she'd be one of the highest paid performers throughout the 1940s. And I wanted to somehow make sure that we could include her as an example of the festival. But I've also tried to be very careful in distinguishing between films about U.S. Latinos and films about Latin Americans. But in here with Greenwich Village, we have an exception, because as it turns out, her character, while continuing to be very much a Carmen Miranda character, is identified as being born in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
And it's about as improbable as anything else in the film.
But that's kind of the fun of her.
Yeah, but we kind of go with it.
Yeah, she was born in Buffalo, which she clearly wasn't.
Yeah.
And then, you know, she'd sing songs like Chattanooga Choo Choo with the Portuguese accent and stuff.
Yeah.
But she was so entertaining, so alive, so magnetic and everything.
She kind of takes over the film.
Right.
The film itself has a fairly flimsy storyline, but she just kind of plows through it. And in a way, and why I was interested in the film, is what she does with ethnicity is, I think, very informing. It's very liberating in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it removes us from an issue of authenticity versus stereotypes or racial masquerade. And her character throughout is playing all sorts of ethnic types. She's gypsy, she's Irish, she's Samoan, she's from Buffalo. And essentially what her character is kind of putting forward is this notion that ethnicity is like a performance.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that identity is really something that's based on mixture. And Carmen Miranda is really a central part of delivering that message.
She was such, I think, a great ambassador for South America, even though she was from Portugal. And made everybody love, you know, everyone loved Carmen Miranda. She has that kind of personality you just kind of embrace.
Yeah.
Everybody loved her. By the same token, her ethnic persona also really kept her from ever doing anything else. I mean, she was kind of trapped in that Carmen Miranda character, and she tried to do other things, but it wasn't really allowed. And when she ever tried to veer away from that is kind of when her career faded a bit after a while.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to look back at her as a stereotype par excellence. She would be parodied and imitated endlessly. But I think it's also important to just recognize part of the kind of liberatory impulse that comes behind that, the way in which this character upsets a lot of the conventions of storytelling and of narrative closure that you would expect from films, and in some ways opens up other possibilities.
Right. So glad you picked this film. Here's the movie starring Carmen Miranda, Don Amici, William Bendix, and a lovely singer advertised at that time as the Cherry Blonde, Vivian Blaine, from 1944, Greenwich Village. Well, I'm back with my co-host this evening, Chon Noriega, a professor at UCLA in the director of the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center. I love this movie. I love that song, Whispering. That's such a nifty film.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was the kind of top song of 1920. And
Yeah.
in some ways, the film's set in the early 1920s, and they're trying to be historically accurate.
Right.
And one of the other ways they do that is the introduction of the Four Step Brothers, which was an African-American flash tap and acrobatic group that got started in the 1920s with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. And they make a somewhat uncredited appearance in the film and help emphasize part of what the Miranda character is able to facilitate, which is a multiracial, multi-ethnic, diverse kind of environment within which people are being creative.
Also, we should talk a little about Vivian Blaine, who'd come, I think she was a band singer. She made a few films at Fox early on, and then Fox was trying to find another girl to kind of be a threat to Betty Grable, to keep Betty Grable in line.
Yeah.
And she never really, Vivian Blaine never really quite
They
clicked
made
it.
a,
But she made State Fair, and she was good in that. But she never really had a great success until Broadway with Guys and Dolls, and then she did the movie version of Guys and Dolls. So she had great success later in her career as a blonde.
The studio really tried to push her in the marketing of this film, just really putting her out there as the next female star. And of course, what happened is it was a Carmen Miranda film.
And then, of course, she had the misfortune. She also did a movie called If I'm Lucky and Dollface, both of which starred Carmen Miranda. So, so Vivian Blaine, no matter where she went, there's Carmen Miranda, just knocking them out of the ballpark.
Hard to come out from under her shadow.
Yeah, exactly. You see that Betty Grable didn't have Carmen Miranda in her films after Betty became a big star. Anyway, good choice and a very entertaining choice. And we have more musicals ahead. And up next, another musical, this one from a far different kind of world. This is from 1961, movie co-directed by Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins, and stars Natalie Wood. It's about two rival New York street gangs, the Sharks and the Jets.